He was a sculptor of shape, a painter of color, an architect of design. Join Spencer Christian on a journey to Spain to discover the inspiration behind Balenciaga, Spanish master of design.
This is Madrid, Spain, the center of Spanish art, culture, and history. Madrid was also home to one of the world's most celebrated fashion designers, Cristobal Balenciaga. I'm Spencer Christian. Join me now for an inside look at the life and the designs of Balenciaga.
Balenciaga was born in 1895 in a little sort of medieval fishing town of Getaria on the Basque coast of Spain.
He came from humble origins, yet he ascended to the very top of the fashion world.
Christian Dior called Balenciaga the master of us all. And I think that this is really a reference to his technical mastery, the fact that he could physically craft himself from beginning to end.
When Balenciaga was only 11 years old, his father died. Yet this tragic loss turned out to be the catalyst for Balenciaga's remarkable career.
His mother, to whom he was devoted, became jobbing seamstress, doing kind of sort of simple dressmaking for the local families. One of her clients were the Casa Torres family. The Marquesa de Casa Torres was a kind of glamorous local aristocrat. He saw the Marquesa dressed for mass, very beautifully dressed in a Paris couture suit, and he sort of stopped her and sort of admired her elegance. I admire the way you dress, and I think I could make your suit. I could copy your suit for you. And the following week, he made the suit, I think with a little bit of help from his mother, which the Marquesa apparently wore to mass the following week. Anyway, she was clearly intrigued by this exceptional little boy, and she eventually helped him to obtain an apprenticeship with a tailor in San Sebastian, and that's where he began to learn his craft.
San Sebastian was the perfect place for Balenciaga. The city catered to the needs of Spain's aristocrats, and it was famous for its dressmaking establishments.
At the age of 22, established his first couture house under his own name in San Sebastian. His success was rapid in Spain, because by the age of 25 he was dressing the Queen of Spain, who would later consider him to have been the greatest dressmaker ever born.
With praise like this from the Queen, it should not be surprising that Balenciaga's designs were in high demand. His designs were dazzling and revolutionary. He soon expanded to include houses in Madrid and Barcelona.
A large part of his business was going to Paris, buying original models from the designers whom he most admired. He would buy the model and the rights to reproduce it, take with him the pattern, and then he'd reinterpret it for his clients in Spain. At the same time, he was working on his own creations.
Balenciaga opened his first Paris couture store in August 1937, during the Spanish Civil War. His success here in Paris was immediate.
He had access to the extraordinary technicians and the fournisseurs, the great suppliers, the great embroiderers, and all that Paris could bring to a fashion designer.
His designs were timeless, his style impeccable, his standards unparalleled.
Balenciaga's concept of dressing a woman was to do the very best for a woman. And I think that when that is your philosophy, and with great craftsmanship and with great knowledge of a woman's body and woman's life and woman's aspirations in life, it becomes an art form, you know?
He was a very talented person, but at the same time, he was very respected because of his moral integrity.
By 1940, Harper's Bazaar could make the extraordinary claim that you know, there wasn't a woman in the world who wasn't wearing something that was in some way inspired by Balenciaga.
Balenciaga's brilliant career continued to flourish, but shunning public attention, he remained a very private person.
The clients never saw him, in fact. He worked in this kind of intense way, in a rather sort of monastic situation, surrounded by his little priestly group of assistants and associates.
But there was at least one notable exception.
My mother, she went after the war, say 1940s, and she wanted to have a dress, but they should make her special price because she was pregnant and she wasn't going to use that afterwards. So they said, no, madam, this is Balenciaga, we don't make special prices. And suddenly she saw Balenciaga just crossing a corridor. She jumped on him and she said, Mr. Balenciaga, just look at me. I want to have a dress made, but they don't want to make me a special price and I'm going not be able to wear this dress afterwards, so I want a special price. And he said, he just looked at her and he said, but I'm not to blame for it, am I? So she loved the answer, and after that they became very great friends. Really, we were very close with him. There, up there, is my granddaughter with my first communion dress. And he made my first communion gown. Wow. That's my first Balenciaga. I was 7. And this is my wedding dress, but it's my daughter wearing it. When I was going to be married, I was 18. He said, well, okay, I'm going to do the dress for you. I'm going to do it. So he himself cut and designed my wedding dress.
Balenciaga's commitment to rigorous work and detailed craftsmanship was evident throughout his career.
Any dress had to be perfectly constructed, and the pattern and the toile that was done, the amount of work and that he would devote until perfection was reached.
And that is where I learned my craft. I was very lucky that I was able to observe, see a great master at work.
We'll be back with more Balenciaga, Spanish Master of Design.
One of the extraordinary things about Balenciaga is the high regard in which he was held by his peers. Coco Chanel called him the only couturier who could tailor a suit, who could create a dress from beginning to end. The others are merely draftsmen, she said.
His amazing genius for design was innate and was matched perhaps only by his profound appreciation for beauty.
Suddenly he got up and just went to, for example, for a sleeve and just took it apart with his hands. And after that he just got to one side, looked at the person, put his knees together, his mouth full of pins and scissors. And that went and I looked, I said, well, there's no sleeve anymore. And after that, he looked at the person and with his pins reconstructed that sleeve. And once he had it pinned, he put it on you, on the person or whatever, on my mother or on me. And the sleeve was absolutely perfect.
Perfect.
He had a sort of feeling for how the material fell, because I've seen him take the material and throw it on his arm and hold it and see how the thing fell.
Yes.
And depending on how that moved, he did the model.
With his dresses, he would often make the undergarment, the sort of petticoat layer, fit the body very, very closely and perfectly. And then the dress itself would be made fractionally larger than that, so that when the wearer walks, there's a passage of air between the dress and the petticoat, and it sort of just floats around the body a little bit, creating a little bit of mystery.
He was a master at sculpture and at understanding, as I understand it, how to take certain fabrics and turn them into miraculous origami sculptures that not only were very smart and very chic, but were comfortable and wearable.
He dressed really the chicest women in the world, a great many of them in America, throughout Europe and South America and so on. His clothes were extremely expensive. He was the most expensive of the couturiers.
But with that price came Balenciaga's singular genius. He was a master innovator in the use of fabrics.
The great skill which he demonstrated was the ability of the finest of his stitching, of the way in which he hid all of his hems, showed the absolute mastery which he had on the technique.
Yo creo que son los cortes que él trata de ocultar esa forma.
The cut, the illumination as far as the possibility of seams and the shape which it gave the material. Simplicity, elegance, a level of appreciation of volumes coming from the material itself.
I've shown the dresses of Balenciaga to the young designers, Spanish young designers, and when I turned them outside in, they just were absolutely aghast because it's so perfect.
But this perfection was not achieved alone. Balenciaga had a very dedicated and close-knit team. The atmosphere in the workroom made a statement of its own.
Going to Balenciaga, you would sit in total silence watching these endless fashion shows. They could last 2 hours. And the girls moved in and out in the approved Balenciaga walk, holding little numbered cards, and you weren't allowed to sketch or perish the thought, photograph anything. If you were a client or a buyer, you just had to write down the number of the dresses the outfits that interested you. The Balenciaga thought it was extremely vulgar to show your teeth, so his mannequins were encouraged never to smile and always to look above the heads of the clients.
The communication was done mainly by the product. No campaigns, but the product was at the center of the work.
Balenciaga, the private man, was just that, a very private person who shied away from the public eye.
He didn't like meeting his clients. He abhorred kind of society events and situations. He worked extremely hard. He had a very, very close-knit group of intimate friends, and he didn't really have time for social and society niceties, really.
And he liked to laugh because people thought he was a very serious person. No, he loved life, he enjoyed life, but in a very restrained circle.
Stay tuned. Balenciaga, Spanish Master of Design, will continue. There were certain popular elements of Spanish life and culture that strongly influenced Balenciaga's designs. Among those were flamenco dancing, royalty, religion, and this, the popular sport of bullfighting.
He very much responded to the visual aspect and the costume of the bull ring. You saw sort of endless examples of the sequined pom-pom trims and lavish embroideries that very, very closely evoke the idea of matador suits of lights.
Balenciaga is one of the greatest designers of all time who really left his mark on fashion.
¿En qué se ha basado muchas cosas del toreo?
The tradition of the bullfighter is an older one. Therefore, the master would have been influenced by their customs. For instance, take the narrow waist. That's a certain feminine characteristic of the bullfighter.
The spirit of the bullfight is, I think it's really a reflection of his this sort of intense nostalgia for a homeland that at that point he'd had to flee. And by the end of his career, it's still there, but it's much more subliminal.
Balenciaga also saw beauty in the art of dance.
The idea of classic flamenco dance dress, the bata de colla, the incredible kind of ruffled trains that we so associate with the idea of flamenco dress. That is a silhouette and an idea that Balenciaga returns to again and again and again. He's able to create this sense of captured movement. You know, there'll be a ruffle that really looks as though it's been caught on the breeze as the dancer makes her sort of swift twirl and turn, but actually it's just permanently frozen like that because of the extraordinary body and presence of the fabric itself.
A great source of inspiration for Balenciaga was the strong Catholic background of his youth.
Heavy aspect of Spanish Catholicism from the early 20th century is something that surprisingly finds resonance in his work. As a little boy, Balenciaga was an altar boy at the church. His uncle was the local priest. He was apparently captivated by these figures and the way they're dressed, and it's sort of extraordinary looking at them now because you really can see Balenciaga color combinations and these the sort of extraordinary kind of hieratic shapes. Whether his chic clients were aware that they were heading off to an opening night at the ballet wearing a priest's cassock, I'm not quite so sure, but one certainly sees resonances in his work. It's kind of extraordinary.
Spanish art also had a dramatic impact on Balenciaga's work.
In his 1939 collection, he produced a whole section of Infanta dresses that were very closely based on Velázquez's extraordinary paintings of the Spanish Infantas. And then I think there's a lot of Goya in his work, the idea of black lace used with soft pinks and ivories, and the way in which he uses them, and the trimmings and the bows, and the kind of femininity in the silhouettes very closely evoke Goya's aristocratic sitters of the late 18th and very early 19th century. Cecil Beaton called Balenciaga fashion's Picasso. There are sort of subtle evocations of Picasso's work in Balenciaga's work.
We'll be back with more Balenciaga, Spanish Master of Design. The rich traditions of Spanish culture and history had a powerful influence on Balenciaga's work.
We saw sort of endless influences of Spanish regional dress in his work, whether it's the capes of Avilla or the fichus or the fold up overdresses, the idea of transformational costume, something that can be worn as a skirt or a cape. There are so many, even some of the decorations and embellishments find echoes in Balenciaga's works. Diana Vreeland, the great, the sort of legendary editor of American Vogue, said that if a woman walked into a party or a room or a situation in a Balenciaga dress, she sort of knocked everyone else out cold.
And now Balenciaga's designs are finding their way into a place where not many designers have been.
People occasionally ask us, Why does fashion, or in this case, haute couture, belong in a museum? And I would say that it's one of the oldest art forms of mankind, to be honest with you. It has been really, I think, of primary interest as not only an art form, but one that was very necessary. It's often done to make a statement, to influence politics, to set oneself apart or set oneself up in a way that's different from other people. And then, of course, in the case of Balenciaga, there's the incredible detail that's involved in the very highly well-thought and executed embroideries and beadwork. And it is, in truth, on that edge between craft and art form.
But at last, Cristobal Balenciaga, the master, decided to bring his remarkable career to a close.
He did give an interview after his retirement to Prudence Glynn of the London Times, and he basically said, you know, fashion was a dog's life, and he'd had enough of it. I think his retirement surprised everyone. I think perhaps he felt a little bit out of step with what was going on in fashion, and that he'd said all he needed to say, and that he was just simply physically exhausted and ready to move on.
Move on, indeed. Balenciaga's designs will be featured at the De Young Museum in San Francisco until July 4th, so you'll be able to see his masterpieces for yourself.
We could not be more honored and more privileged to work with Hamish and Mr. De La Renta, and really museums from around the world who have loaned us their extraordinary works of art by this gentleman who, as the cognoscenti know, was the bellwether for design in the 20th century.